The dark secret behind Uber. What if the app you use to get a ride with just a tap of your phone hides a story of relentless ambition, ruthless tactics, and deep controversy? Imagine a company so innovative that it changed how the world moves, yet so polarizing that it sparked protests, lawsuits, and global outrage. Have you ever wondered what it takes to disrupt an entire industry and at what cost? This is the story of Uber, the ride-hailing giant that revolutionized transportation but left a trail of questions about ethics, fairness, and the price of innovation. Uber is one of the most important companies of the 21st century when it comes to startups and new ideas. When it started in 2010, Uber changed the cab business and became a well-known name very quickly. From an idea born on a cold Parisian night to a worldwide phenomenon, its history is full of ambition, new ideas, and debate. But behind Uber's quick rise is a darker story of pushy behavior, breaking the law, taking advantage of workers, and moral failings. This was the spark that started a revolution. Travis Kalanick and Garrett Camp, two tech entrepreneurs, became the first people to work together on Uber in December 2008. They were in Paris for a meeting. After having a hard time calling a taxi, they came up with an idea, an app that would let people call a private car with the touch of a button. Camp and Kalanick thought this idea could help the transportation business become more efficient. Uber Cab started up in San Francisco in 2010 and charged a lot of money for expensive car services. In 2011, the company changed its name to Uber and started focused on making rides more affordable by launching UberX, a service that let regular drivers use their own cars to take people places. This changed the way people get around cities and made Uber even more of a disruptor. What Travis Kalanick did to get there. Travis Kalanick, CEO and co-founder of Uber, was at the center of its rapid rise. Kalanick is a brazen and driven businessman whose past businesses shaped the way he does business now. He co-founded Scour, a peer-to-peer file-sharing company that went out of business after a huge copyright case before joining Uber. He didn't give up and started Red Swoosh, a similar business that he later sold for $15 million. These events made Kalanick more of a survivor, which he brought to Uber. Kalanick thought it was important to push the limits and take risks. He encouraged people to be aggressive and ambitious by stressing that competition was a war that had to be won at all costs. This way of thinking affected how Uber grew, dealt with rules, and competed with other companies, changing the taxi business. Uber's way of doing business was designed to be disruptive. Traditional car services had to follow strict rules, like getting licenses, being inspected, and following rules about how much to charge. Uber got around these rules by calling itself a technology platform instead of a service company. Since drivers weren't considered employees, but rather independent contractors, Uber didn't have to offer perks like health insurance or paid leave. This method was harshly criticized by cab companies, government officials, and workers' rights activists. Uber was criticized by taxi drivers in many places, who said it was unfair to compete with them. Still, Uber's users couldn't deny how convenient and cheap it was. The app changed the way people thought about transportation with its easy-to-use interface, flexible pricing, and real-time recording. Expansion that is aggressive in the use of tactics. Uber's growth was very fast. It was running in more than 200 towns in 45 countries by 2014. But bold and sometimes controversial strategies helped the company grow very quickly. To get a big share of new markets, Uber often started offering services without the right permits, betting that demand from customers would push officials to allow it to run. Greyball, a piece of software that helped Uber find and avoid police officers trying to enforce local rules, was one of the company's most well-known tools. Greyball would show people they thought were regulators fake app interfaces that would stop them from booking rides and gathering proof of illegal activities. Uber was able to operate in cities where it was legally illegal to do so by using this strategy. However, when these actions were made public, Uber faced criticism and legal scrutiny. Uber was very competitive, which made it act in strange ways when it was going up against Lyft and other competitors. Uber workers are said to have scheduled and canceled thousands of Lyft rides to mess up the service and use software called Hell to keep an eye on Lyft drivers. These moves showed that Uber was ready to break moral rules to get ahead. Abuse of workers and problems with labor. Uber changed the way people get around, but how it affects drivers has been the subject of a lot of discussion. Uber saved a lot of money by having drivers work as independent contractors instead of employees. Costs like car repairs, insurance, and gas were paid for by the drivers. Many drivers thought Uber would be a good way to make money at first because it offered big bonuses and other benefits. But when the company cut back on advertising, drivers started to have trouble with low pay. After taking into account costs, studies showed that some drivers made less than the minimum wage. Also, drivers were at risk because they didn't have job stability or benefits. These actions led to protests in cases around the world. In more than one country, courts and labor groups questioned Uber's decision to classify drivers as independent workers. Even though Uber had some legal setbacks, it kept defending its business plan, saying that it gave drivers freedom and flexibility. Scandals and backlash from the public. There were also scandals that hurt Uber's image as it grew. In 2014, a high-profile case in India in which an Uber driver raped a client showed that the company's background check process was not perfect. Cases like this all over the world made people worry about the safety of passengers. The company's attitude made criticism even stronger. A former engineer named Susan Fowler wrote a blog post in 2017 that showed how Uber had a widespread problem with sexual harassment and sexism. In her story, she talked about a bad place to work where reports were ignored and bad behavior was accepted. When these facts came to light, the company apologized to the public, launched an internal review, and fired several executives. Uber's use of God View, a tool that let employees see where riders were at all times, caused privacy issues and was another controversy. Also, Uber had a huge data breach in 2016 that affected 57 million drivers and users. The company paid hackers $100,000 to hide the breach instead of telling anyone about it, which was widely seen as wrong. Fights over rules and legal challenges. As Uber grew, authorities became more and more against it. Uber was accused by cities and countries around the world of breaking local rules and hurting the taxi business. Some governments outright stopped Uber, while others put limits and fines on it. When Uber ran into problems with the law, it often fought back. The company used its app to get people to back legalization by telling them to write letters to governments and demand it. Because of Uber's popularity in this approach, regulators often had to work with the company. But in some cases, Uber's refusal to follow the rules led to long court fights and fines. Travis Kalanick's fall. By 2017, the rise of scandals, lawsuits, and public anger had hurt Uber and the people in charge of it. Investors put more and more pressure on Travis Kalanick, and he quit as CEO. When he left, the company made a big change as it tried to fix its image and deal with systemic problems. Dara Khosrowshahi, who took over for Kalanick, made it a priority to rebuild trust with regulators, workers, and the public. Uber worked to make things safer, handle driver concerns, and be more open while he was in charge. But the effects of Uber's questionable actions continued to be felt for a long time. An uneasy past. Uber is still the world's biggest ride-hailing service, and it works in more than 900 places around the world. The business has expanded its offerings to include food delivery, freight operations, and self-driving cars. Uber has had a huge effect on how people get around cities, but its influence is very controversial. In some ways, Uber has changed the way people move by making it easier, cheaper, and more accessible. It has also led to a lot of new ideas, which has helped create the gig economy and shaken up old businesses. The story of Uber, on the other hand, shows the bad side of Silicon Valley's attitude of disruption. People have different ideas about the morality of modern capitalism because of how it treats workers, breaks rules, and acts aggressively. The story of Uber makes us think about the right mix between new ideas and responsibility, the rights of gig workers, and the function of businesses in society. Uber's success shows how powerful new ideas can be and how technology can change whole businesses. But it also serves as a warning of the difficulties and duties that come with such a change. Because Uber is always changing, its story is both an inspiration and a warning. It shows how complicated and contradictory the business world is today. Enjoying the content? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on stories that inspire, inform, and challenge the way you see the world.